Welcome to the Eskrima podcast. My name is Jason Enai, and I am an Eskrimador. If you're just joining this podcast, I talk about Filipino martial arts and the martial arts lifestyle. I've been doing martial arts since I was a wee lad. I started formal classes when I was 6, and I've been doing that forever. Anyways, if you could just like and just subscribe and comment, that would be great too. But I wanted to talk today about my lessons last night. So I had one lesson in particular where we just went over a few of the basic movements and techniques and things, and we talk about growth. That's with my more senior student, Patrick. Of course, we recorded a few techniques for the daily emails for our subscribers list. And, we just worked on some techniques, had some fun working on variations and things like that. And, I like when I'm working with someone who's skillful, knowledgeable, more experienced, right? And I'm not starting from scratch with that particular student. I can then cover the material that we're supposed to work on, but then I can also do extreme or moderate or slight variations, subtle things and changes in my own way to play with the art. I mean, because, one of the things that keeps us engaged in martial arts is the way that we enjoy it. And one of the things that you can enjoy in martial arts is its variations, its nuances and differences, and getting to experiment and play with those things allows for us to be able to experience the variety and scope and depth of the art. Which leads me to working with Dr. Wary. So Doc and I, he's been my student for more than 5 years, more than 6 years, way before COVID. Right here we're sitting in 2023, right? In any event, we're going over some of what would be considered more advanced material in the Inai Serrata Eskrima curriculum. And he goes, well, what's the difference of this? And why do that? And what's the difference of this? And we're going through different counters, and, why not just do it the other way? Which are really interesting questions. It kind of speaks to the idea of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And, when is too much variety, right? Like, why do all these different things? What I've learned over the last 46 years of training and teaching is that each movement, each technique, each drill, each exercise, at least in the United system of Eskrima, presents a new idea or gets deeper into something that's already been covered elsewhere, right? And that's an important part of the martial arts. We see very commonly in the common, everywhere available martial arts programs. I don't know if we call it an end of the curriculum, right? But an end of what they teach. And it could be because there's a lack of understanding of the instructor. It could be because students don't stick around that long. It could be all kinds of different reasons. We don't really know unless, we're training at that school and we have a close relationship with the teacher and stuff like that. We don't know. A lot of times you see some of these schools, like there's the school of martial arts. It's run by a former cheerleader, saber kitten person who's, she's very dynamic. She's a great martial artist in terms of her, what we would call demonstration martial arts or exhibition martial arts. And she'd, gotten very well recognized in the very large martial arts organization that we have here as far as commercial schools. She's great. and she doesn't have that much charisma, right? So, and she's never been in a fight, not a real fight. So you have instructors like that provide a lot of value to children and provide a lot of value to families. But when we look at it from like the true depth of a martial art and what we want out of that as martial artists, we see that we find people that are seeking, I guess you could say, more value. That could be the way that you look at seeking more value, right? And that's okay for people to look for that, right? Not every art is going to cater to every person, and not everybody is going to the local dojo for the same thing, but it's that variety that has, captured people's imaginations. It's that depth that brings value to fight choreography for like John Wick movies and Jason Bourne movies and any other movie which would require, fight scenes that are engaging, inspiring, amazing, right? A simple block and a punch doesn't really suffice. The spaghetti western fight choreography that we enjoyed in the 1970s and maybe even the 80s is just not gonna cut it today, right? So the depth of the technique is interesting, and it comes from like some very basic ideas. Like everybody's teaching you to block, and everybody's teaching you to parry, and everybody's teaching you to dodge, everybody's teaching you to hit, and anybody can teach you those things, right? The how could I do it different is a very interesting question. When could I do it different? And to whom I would do certain techniques to, because maybe they have more body mass, less body mass. There's a differentiation of shoulder height or hip height that changes how I might interact with my opponent. Those are interesting things for us to do in martial arts, where there's a lot of variety there. And it brings out art in your martial arts, right? Your martial arts needs to be martial. It needs to be combative and to be martial arts truly, right? Like, if you're not, at the end of the day, at the very least, imparting upon your student, or have learned yourself from learning from your teacher and your peers at your local school, how to prevent someone from applying their fist to your face in a vigorous manner, like, what are you really doing, right? Some people will say, well, I don't do that because I do jiu-jitsu. Old school Brazilian jiu-jitsu taught defenses against getting punched in the face. So if you're not learning that, you might just be learning a sport, and that's okay too, but you're moving away from the martial part of martial arts. And you have to have heart in your martial arts, because if you're not invested physically, mentally, and emotionally in your martial art, and I'm talking about that from the point of view of learning variation and learning nuance today, right? Then it's really not going to embody you. You will not be able to express yourself in that. And that means that there will be no art in your martial arts. So, Doc is asking me, why do we do it different? Why do we do it different? We don't have to. A block is a block and a punch is a punch and all those things. That's totally true, right? But at the same time, I'm reminded of something that my father taught me, as well as martial arts. He taught me how to play pool. He learned from a billiard shark, and he taught me, and I actually used to pull shark when I was in my early 20s. And so he would say it's all in the way that you leave the cue ball. It's all in the leave, right? One of the things that's valuable about learning variations is I can receive an attack, and I can determine how our position is after I receive that attack in my counterattack, which will give me new opportunities. And I can also strike in such a way as to leave myself in a new position. We see Mike Tyson do this all the time with his footwork. Or we saw, because he doesn't fight that much anymore at all, but there's a lot of video out of him showing people techniques in his amazing footwork that he has, that coupled with his great body angulation and his devastating strikes is an art in and of itself, and an expression in and of itself that's, awe-inspiring, terrifying, amazing, right? And he has his own way of doing things, right? His own variation and his own way of doing it. And it's him. No one else boxes like he does. You could learn his style of boxing, peekaboo boxing, and you can learn those strikes and stuff. But you may not necessarily be able to do it like him, simply because you just don't have the mass, right? And a lot of people never get to pro boxing, even if they like boxing, because they don't have the drive, right? It goes back to that old story of the old man taking the boy to the river and drowning him, and then pulling him out of the water just at the last moment and saying, "What did you feel?" And he goes, "I felt this undeniable need to breathe." And the old man would go, "Well, when you feel like that about training, come back to me, otherwise go away," right? Like, if you don't have that heart in your art, it doesn't matter. It won't matter, right? Most of my students, all of my students that have been training for in excess of 5 years, which is about when most people quit in a lot of the standard schools, right? They get their black belt around that time, they're done because they had a goal. Lifetime martial arts are different. We're looking for the nuance and the variation, and we're going to ask questions like, why do it that way? Why do it different? Well, just to do it different could be the answer, right? To know that there is another way, to know that there's other depth. My experience through security work and working in law enforcement, making arrests with people, right, was that sense of nuance and variation allowed me to have very different answers than my colleagues would have in the same situation. It wasn't that I couldn't brute force things, which is what usually bouncers do, and the fugitive retrieval agents that I would work with, they tended to be more Hulk smash kind of answers. And I generally wasn't like that. I wasn't known for raising my voice all that much. In fact, it was almost perceived as if I wasn't aggressive enough, right? On the other hand, I wasn't opposed to yanking someone out of a car and throwing them 3 feet out of the car as I arrested them, which is a little bit more exuberant, Hulk smashy kind of way, right? But there's always nuance, and those nuances give you answers and answer questions more precisely. Right? I want to say elegantly, but it's really more precisely, right? If an attack comes at you and you can stop it with, like, we use a crossblock. This is a flat interdiction, providing a flat or perpendicular plane of defense, right, against the line of attack. So it's like, a car hitting a wall, right? It's going to stop it, provided the wall is strong enough, right? So you got to have a strong crossblock, right? Now, a couple things can happen there. I can receive that blow, stop it, and absorb so that it stays. I could receive that blow, stop it so hard that it bounces off, right? I could stop that blow, absorb it, and shed it to one side or another, because I need to either change the orientation of my opponent so that I can take advantage of a new footing position, or so that I can zone away from a new threat, right? Or I'm changing their orientation so that way we can introduce a threat that they can't see, because I have an ally, right? So, Doc is like, "Hey, why are we doing this different?" I said, "Have you considered that there might be someone coming from the other sector?" And he goes, "Oh, he doesn't say it this way, but he's like, oh, that's a very good point, right? That's a very, very good point." So those are the things that we have to consider, and where nuance and variation become useful. Variation for the sake of variation is not good, right? And that sentiment comes from a saying that my father and I have said for many, many years, that drilling for the sake of drilling is not useful for trading, right? So, there's lots of different ways that you can format your martial arts so people can learn it. Right now, like the biggest fad right now is Eskrima as far as Filipino martial arts is concerned. That's the biggest, sizzle. There's a lot of sizzle. Balintawak is very exciting, right, to do and practice. And chief among those would be Grandmaster Bobby Tabawada. Is very spectacular watching him move. And I've been seeing him teach since, the mid-late 90s, right? So he's amazing to watch, right? That variation and that differentiation in and of itself is amazing to watch, right? So when we look at martial arts and we want to learn, we want to have new answers, part of that, variation is it keeps us engaged. And then the other side of it is it gives us new answers, new problems. It allows us to consider new ideas, right? And that's important for us to do. I won't say that you need to go to another style to do that. That's not true. I've had the opportunity to work with some amazing Taekwondo practitioners over the years, from, lineages coming from both the West Coast and the Midwest and the East Coast. And, even though, many Taekwondo schools tend to not have a lot of curriculum after about 10 years at best, usually about 5 to 7 years, like the woman I was speaking about earlier, right? There have been others that I've met that have just this deep well of information and understanding of the art that goes well beyond the forms that you guys practice in Taekwondo, if that's what you're doing, right? And well beyond the sparring things and all that stuff, just in the depth and interesting variation that can be done in the sparring, right? There's Master Bill Avon and Master Scott Manthe are two people that I think of right now that have some amazing, material and curriculum on teaching fundamentals and how learning all those different things and then experiencing the way that we can vary the combinations of those things increase the depth. But variation in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean that there is depth. There has to be more there, right? In the end, there are only 4 things that really make up martial arts in terms of the techniques and how they work and what we employ. And they have nothing to do with, whether it's a Korean martial art or a Filipino martial art or a Chinese martial art or something that was made up in the 50s and now it's an Israeli martial art, whatever it is, right? It has nothing to do. Even the idea that it's made in the 50s is not material, right? It's that, does it have good physics? Is the geometry right? Does the physiology of the practitioner support the tactics and strategies that they attempt to employ? And does the practitioners themselves have the right psychology, both to use that tactic or strategy, to use it righteously, and also to feel okay using it, right? You could be the greatest martial artist, have aesthetically appealing martial art, physically, geometrically sound techniques that have good bracing angles and you're taking steps to strike at angles that not only allow you to, generate a lot of power, but exploit the weakness of a stance, etc. You can be fast, you can be powerful. But if you're not willing to use it, it doesn't matter. And if you're not using it right, it's not going to matter after the fact, because there will be a consequence for using your martial arts. And if you don't have the psychology to do that, then you'll be where a lot of soldiers end up in with their regret for the things that they did, if they did something that was wrong, right, against their own nature, right? Martial arts is a beautiful thing, and I guess this particular podcast, I wanted to talk about its variation, and we got into also its consequences, which isn't always present. It's a never-present thing that we need to think about, right? So, when we do martial arts, it can't just be, but it has to be at least a punch is a punch and a kick is a kick. And you need to get into that variation and understanding that there are so many different kinds of punches, and there's so many different kinds of kicks, and there's so many different kinds of blocks and parries, till you get to the point where a punch is a punch, parry is a parry, block is a block, but at a deeper level of understanding because of the subtlety and nuance of the art itself and what you can do with that. That's the beautiful thing about martial arts. That's what makes it art, and what allows you to go and say, wow, this person learned from this teacher, and this other person learned from the same teacher, and this other person, and they move so differently. It answers that, like, how is that possible? But at the same time, martial endeavors are a science in many ways, right? If we look at it from a strategic standpoint. So we do need to approach things in a regimented way so that you learn a standard block, a standard punch, and a standard kick, and then learn those nuances. Because then once you go through that process, you can answer Doc's question, well, why would we do it different? You can kick with the ball of your foot when you do a round kick or a roundhouse kick. This is a circular kick that might be diagonally upward, horizontally flat at the waistline, or at the thigh, or at the head, or any other point in between, right? You can do that same strike and swing your leg in a similar manner anyways, and it'd be described as a round kick, but you could kick with your instep. You could also kick with your shin, right? If you're a shooter, like savate boxe française, you might kick with your toe, right? They're all generally in this round kick following this angle. And if you're kicking with your right leg, in Filipino martial arts, it's either going to be, at least in the United system of Eskrima, it's going to be either a angle 10, an angle 3, or an angle 1, or some kind of variation in between those things, right? And the striking surface is going to determine how close you are, and also the kind of penetration of the blow. A Muay Thai kick is usually done with the shin. It's usually done at the thigh height, maybe at the head height, right, or the waist height. But a lot of times it's that, and it communicates a lot of mass. Whereas a roundhouse snap kick from a Taekwondo practitioner is going to be done with the instep of the foot. It's going to be fast. It's going to retract, and it's going to have a lot of pop, right? And then you have a karate type strike that you'll find in some of the hard styles, which they will do that same kick in terms of it being considered a roundhouse, but they do it with the ball of the foot, in which case that's going to be devastating, very small striking surface, right? And then of course you have, the shoot arts where they'll kick you with a toe, which is even more penetrating and can have very serious consequences if you receive a blow like that, right? So we have to consider all of those things when we're training, because while all of those strikes come back with the same angle, right, they're not necessarily going to be defended exactly the same way, and that's that nuance, right? I'll maybe evade it slightly different because the penetration of the blow is different, or I might not block certain ones. Like, generally speaking, I don't really want to block a Muay Thai kick. That's a lot of mass, right? And I have answers, right? I have different answers. I can interdict, I can redirect, I can displace the target, I can preemptively strike. That gives me the ability to express myself. And so I guess the final answer to Doc's question of why would we do different, what's the difference here is, I can be me. I can answer the problem in my way because that's who I am as a martial artist. And ultimately, that's part of the path of martial arts, is to find out who you are, right? I love that one scene, I think it's in the second Matrix, where the Seraph, or whatever his name was, he goes, you never truly know someone until you fight them. We'll see you on the training floor.